today? Hello, folks. Hey, everybody. So, whose voice is checking in? I saw someone here. Yeah, I do have my alto sax. I'll play a little bit of this on my alto sax. Let me turn this a little bit for you guys. There we go. Here's my alto. Hi, everybody. I do have my trumpet too. Let me put my neck strap on. There we go. Got my neck strap. Let me turn my music down a little bit here. Someone said Toy Story vibes. I guess you get some of that jazzy clarinet going and jazzy saxophone. It sounds a little bit like Toy Story. That, by the way, that's a movie that I really want to see. Has anyone seen the new Toy Story yet? I'm going to go see it. So welcome to our live stream this week, everybody. Thank you for being here. We have, of course, we have Dennis here on the line with us again. Hi, Dennis.
Hey, how you doing, Steve?
Very, very good. So Dennis is going to be watching for your comments and helping us out. Victoria says that she saw Toy Story and she said it's great. So I can't wait to see it. Why don't we jump in? We'll get some of your questions in a minute. I have had a busy week. It's my first full week of summer. I think probably everyone out there watching is on summer vacation from school. Is everyone on summer vacation? We got out on right around June 18th. And so now we're into June and almost into July. And this week we have 4th of July here in the US. That's a big celebration, a big fun thing that we do in the summertime. Lots of fireworks. So I'm looking forward to that. Did I do anything musical this weekend? I took a vacation this weekend. So I didn't really play any music this weekend, but I went down to the beach and had a nice time. And I'm very excited to be back here with you guys. Why don't we jump in and get some questions, okay? So I see some good questions coming through. Tyrone wants to know if I have my tenor sax. I do. I can play some tenor sax this week. Got a lot of people checking in. Dan Castro. Dan, you're here every week. I'm going to answer your question. Thank you for that question. Dan wants to know what my alto saxophone setup is. And when a musician says the word setup, right? If someone asks you what's your trumpet setup or what's your clarinet setup, what they're asking you is what kind of mouthpiece do you have? What kind of reed do you have? Even what kind of ligature do you have and your instrument? So my alto sax setup is, oh, that's a good question, Dennis. What's the difference between a cheap and expensive instrument? I want to answer that one next.
Okay.
I have a Selmer Mark 6 alto saxophone. So Selmer is the brand, it's the company that makes it, and Mark 6 is like the edition. So they came out with the Mark 6 in the 50s and the 60s, and so they don't make them anymore. That's why Mark 6s, you'll see them, they look kind of old and even scratchy. And they're actually really valuable instruments because they don't make them anymore and lots of people think they're great instruments. Selmer Mark 6. And then my mouthpiece is called a Meyer. I'll take it off for you. It's a Meyer, I think it's a 5-star. So if you look real close, you can see there's like a star there, or a diamond. A Meyer 5, and then I have Diodario Select Jazz Reeds. 3 medium, and I play on a Rovner ligature. So that's my setup. My next question that I wanted to answer. Oh, Ninja Syndicate, I just answered your question. 3 medium. Diodario, 3 medium jazz select. So someone asked me, what is the difference between a cheap and an expensive instrument? So the main difference is the quality of the materials that they use. When they make the instrument at the factory, a more expensive instrument or a high quality instrument, they'll use really more carefully selected materials that are going to last longer and won't break as easily. And it's also the quality that they put into actually putting the instrument together, the craftsmanship, and when they make the pieces, are they really careful, and do they have a lot of people in the process like watching the quality? So bottom line is, when you're shopping for an instrument, I don't recommend that you go with the cheapest instrument that you can find, because you can get some really inexpensive instruments out there if you're doing an internet search, but you're probably going to be disappointed with a really inexpensive instrument, because it's probably going to break on you and it won't make as good of a sound. So you have to do a little bit of research, and you have to try some different instruments. You have to get input from professional musicians, your teachers, and try to find an instrument that you can afford but isn't the cheapest thing you can find, because you might have more problems with that than you even realize. I'm looking through for some questions, but Dennis, is anything jumping out at you for a good question?
Yeah, somebody earlier on was asking, how do you feel about 3.5 to 4 time? I don't know what that is, but
Yeah.
another one wants to know, and another one is, how do I properly learn to read music? They want to learn how to do it. What is the proper way to do that?
Okay. So the first question that someone asked is, how do I feel about 3.5 to 4 size reeds? So reeds come in, the numbers tell you, and Ninja, I'm going to get to your question about reed company. They come in numbers of how dense the reed is. And basically, the higher the number, the more resistance it provides when you try to make a sound. So if you're playing a higher number, it's going to be a little bit harder to get a sound on. I play on around a 3, a 3.5. I haven't really gone higher than 3.5. Sometimes clarinet players especially like to go onto harder reeds, like even a 3.5 or a 4, because sometimes on a clarinet you want to get that higher resistance to get the sound that you want. So most high schoolers or middle schoolers, elementary, are going to be around a 2.5 to a 3.5, somewhere in there. Okay, and then the other question was what was it basically? How to
How do I properly learn to read music? What's the proper way to get doing it?
How to properly learn to read music. It's many steps, but basically what you want to start with is get yourself an easy method book, like a beginner method book. And the most important thing for learning to read music that I find is understanding that music is written on a series of lines and spaces. So have you guys ever used your hand to do the lines and spaces? So if we're doing treble clef, or for clarinet, trumpet, flute, those instruments, we have our bottom line, E, and then we go E, G, B, D, F, right? And then in the spaces we go F, A, C, E. Some of you already got that ahead of time. When I first learned that, I got a little bit confused because it didn't make sense to me. I didn't see the pattern, right? I was like E, G, B, D, F, okay, and then I learned F, A, C, E, and I thought, okay, but I didn't get the pattern, and the pattern is, it's just an alphabet. So say your alphabet from A up to G. Ready? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then what happens after G in the musical alphabet is we don't go on to H or I or J. We stop and we go back to A again. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It keeps going like that. So if you look at your hand staff, we have E here. Watch this. It just goes E, F, G. Then we start over. A, B, C, D, E, F. And it continues like that, up and down. There's a little trick for reading music. Um, so, what else do we have here? Oh yeah, okay. Someone is asking me well, a lot of great questions. Okay, but so Luau Pulia, I'm gonna have trouble saying your entire name, but is asking me, do you know about the Midwest Clinic thing in Chicago? Yes, I do. So I've been there a couple of times. I haven't gone there in like 2 years. I think I'm going to go next year. I'm going to turn this a little bit because the sun is shining brightly on my computer. Um, so I've gone there a couple of times. It's in Chicago. It's a really cool thing. A ton of music teachers gather and band directors, and we learn a lot about how to teach better. And you get to see a lot of products and try out instruments. Um, the on my channel, if you go back and look, I actually did a vlog from my trip to Midwest Clinic like 3 years ago. So check out my YouTube channel for Midwest Clinic. I have some videos from that. Ninja, I want to get back to your question about reed companies. Okay, so my favorite reeds to play on are Diodario, but there's also Van Doren's are really good. So I would say my top two recommendations for reeds are Diodario reeds and Van Doren reeds. Okay, but I would, as with anything, you try them out and see which one that you like the best. Okay, Dennis, you want to drop us a question?
Yeah, you want to know, somebody want to know some tips for transitioning from the instrument band to the full band. So they're going from, when you're practicing with your instruments in the group, how does that translate better into the full band?
So practicing individually versus getting back into the full band, or
well practicing with your instrument group.
Oh.
Everybody's practicing, learning the same thing, but how do you? I guess they're having problems in adjusting to all the other instruments.
Okay, so if you ask do you remember who any chance who asked that question, Dennis?
No, right up. Yeah.
All right, if you're the person who asked this question, this is a question about practicing with your same instrument group. Like say all the saxophones are going to have a sectional, or all the flutes are going to have a sectional, and then you're having a little bit of maybe confusion getting back into the full band. So when you're playing in a band, you have to have sort of 3 settings on your ear, okay? And they all kind of are going at the same time, but they all have to be, you have to concentrate on one at a time, but at the same time you're always listening. And here are the 3 levels. The first level you're listening to is, of course, you're listening to yourself to make sure you're making a good sound and you're playing the right notes and all that stuff, right? But a lot of times, some students will stop there and they don't listen onto the other levels. The next level is you also listen to yourself, but the people around you in your section. So you're listening to how your music that you're playing is fitting in with the whole section, okay? And then the third level is you listen to how your section and you are fitting in with the balance of the entire band. So it's like 3 levels. You listen for yourself, then you're listening to your section blend, you're listening to the whole band as an entire unit, and seeing how your part as a section fits into the band. So as you get more and more skilled on your instrument and more skilled as a section, then you can start taking your ear and opening it up to the full band. And that helps you figure out how your music fits together. I hope that answers your question. Now I saw another comment here. A lot of great questions. Goodness gracious. Well, Luau just checked back in and said that your band got chosen as the top 3 in the country. So congratulations. Good job on that. Someone asked, how do you stop airy? Chavito asked, how do you stop airy sounds on your sax? Well, you make sure your reed is on straight, and you make sure you warm up, and that you're using a good embouchure. A lot of times an airy sound can be either a reed that's not working so well, or it's not on straight, or you're not using a good embouchure, the right embouchure. There's a quick thing for airy sounds. Here's another quick answer. Chris is asking me, how do you play French horn music to alto saxophone? So, Chris, I need you to let me know. Do you mean um, if you're playing French horn and you're reading your friend's music that plays alto sax? Okay, I'll answer that. If you're playing the French horn and you're along with your friend on alto sax, you have to imagine that every note is one note lower than what you're seeing. Okay, so if your alto sax friend has an A, you would go one note down from that. You'd play a G. If your alto sax friend has a B, you would think one note down from that and play an A on the French horn. That's because the French horn plays everything 5 steps. Oh, Chris is saying I play sax and reading French horn. Okay, so it's the opposite. So you would look at every French horn note that's written and you would play 1 step higher. So if the French horn part says G, you play A on the alto sax. If the French horn part says B flat, you play a C. Things like that. Okay, so someone is asking me about, let's see, I got a couple questions from Ian about playing Amazing Grace on the alto sax. So I'll just play that for you, okay? This is Amazing Grace on the alto sax. I'll lower this a little bit for you so you guys can see my fingers. And Dennis, I'm going to come to you next if there's a question you've been seeing.
Okay.
So here's Amazing. I got a request to play Amazing Grace in the alto sax, so I'm going to go ahead and play it. So I have to figure out what key I'm going to play this in. The very first part of the song is, if I'm thinking of my do re mi scale, sol do mi. So I'm going to do this in. I was singing it in D major, so I'm going to play A D. That's how I'm going to start. So that's Amazing Grace. If you Google that, Google alto sax Amazing Grace, you should probably find some sheet music for that. So Dennis, give me a question.
Yep. So these are two that are somewhat connected. One is somebody was looking for music for 1,000 years and didn't know where you would go to find it. And the other was, what's the general requirement for joining a school band? It sounded like it was from somebody who's not done it before and wanted to know, at least generally, what are the requirements?
Requirements for joining the school band?
Yep.
Okay. I mean, that might vary. That depends on what grade. Bye, Shadow. Shadow has to go. See you next time. That would depend on the grade that you're, the ability level of the school band. So if it's an elementary band or if it's a beginner band, you don't have to have any experience usually. If it's like a middle school or an older band or a high school band, they might have requirements like you have to learn how to play a couple of scales. So really what you want to do, I'd say if it's not a beginner band, you probably want to take some lessons and learn how to make the basic sound on your instrument, how to hold your instrument properly, how to play a couple of notes, and then I'm sure your music teacher at school would give you any other requirements that they would want to require you to learn. Okay? The next, first I want to give a shout out before I answer my next question. We have Armin Tabibi in our chat room who's giving a lot of great feedback to some of our questions. So Armin, if you could just check in and let me know where you're watching from, and tell me maybe how long you've been playing, what instrument you play. But I want to thank you for checking in and answering some of our questions. The other question was somebody wanted to do 1,000 Years. I think it's by Christina Perri, right? Is that who did that?
Yeah, I think so.
So what I do, folks, if I want to learn how to play a song, I'll listen to it and figure it out. But you can also, you can Google the name of the song. Like, I'm just going to do 1,000 Years. I'll do clarinet. What, did they say what instrument they wanted, Dennis?
No, they didn't.
All right, 1,000 Years, clarinet, sheet music, right? I'm just Googling that right now, okay? And there it is. So right away, I've got music for clarinet on for 1,000 Years, okay? And it gives you like the whole song. Usually when I do my YouTube songs, I don't do the full, complete song from beginning to end, because most people just want to learn how to play the main part of the song. So that's how I would recommend you do that if you're going to do that on your own. Now, Armin has checked in to answer my question. Armin is watching from Atlanta, lives in Virginia, plays clarinet, and has been playing for 4 years. Okay, so thank you, Armin. It's very nice to meet you. Thank you for checking out my channel. Let's see here. This is any good. Dennis, anything else jumping out at you? I'm kind of scrolling through our comments.
Somebody says they got a new clarinet from a seller and they had put glue, tack, or thumb pad or something, and I can't get it off. Any ideas how to get it off?
A thumb pad or on the mouthpiece?
Yeah, right. No, it just says sellers that they had put glue, tack on the thumb pad.
Oh. Who the person did that, or like their teacher?
Yeah, the seller.
Oh, well, that's a question. Sometimes those technical repair questions, I'm not so knowledgeable about that. I would recommend you ask a repair technician, someone who specializes in repairing instruments. They might know a safe way to remove that glue. Oh, there it is. Did you just copy it?
Yeah, I just copied it and sent it out that way.
Oh, that makes sense. Cool. Yeah, so I would recommend that person with that clarinet glue question go to a repair person. Just call a repair shop, and they might do it for you. So someone jumped in here with a question. Tina Higgins asked about warm-up pieces for clarinet. So if I'm warming up on clarinet, Tina, I pretty much will just do long tones and scales. I usually don't do a specific piece for warming up. I'll do long tones, I'll do scales, and then I'll just go right into whatever piece I'm practicing. So I hope that is a good answer. If you're looking for Tina, if you're looking for ideas of things to warm up with, you could get like an etude book, a book of clarinet etudes, and just play some of the slow etudes to help you get warmed up. Now, going back a little bit, one of my viewers, Dan, asked me, Dan, did you ask me if I'm more of a classical or a jazz or a contemporary player? I think that's what you asked me. I would say probably jazz is my number one. Oh, Tina Higgins just bought the 32 Rosé Etudes. That's awesome. Tina, that's a great book. That's one of the top books to get. So Dan was asking me if I'm more jazz, classical, or contemporary. So I'd say number one, I'm jazz. That's my favorite thing to play. Then I also really love to play classical music, but then I also play in a lot of bands where I'm playing in more of a rock and roll or contemporary style. So all three, Dan, but jazz is the top one for me. Awesome stuff, you guys. You know, I'm going to answer a few more questions. Oh, here's a good question. Alejandra has been asking, I asked a few times, how do you stop the octave changes in an alto saxophone? So, how many sax players do we have watching? And Dennis, I'm going to answer that question about how to make flute notes last longer, if you see that one.
Okay. Yep.
So we got some sax players watching. So it's very common with younger, or not just younger, but people who are less experienced on the saxophone, people who play, when you get down into the low range, that it tends to squeak on you. And the sun is really, it's a sunny day. It's kind of blaring here. what you have to do is you have to have the proper embouchure. So say O, bottom lip, top teeth. If you push up too much with your bottom lip onto the reed as you go down, it'll sort of keep the reed from vibrating. And so tornado is jumping in. Don't you need a loose embouchure? Yes and no. I don't like to use the word loose because if you tell someone to loosen up for low notes, it doesn't mean to relax your muscles because your muscles need to stay firm. What it means is you open up the space where your top and bottom teeth are, and you open up a little bit like you're saying ah or oh. I say like, imagine like you have a ping pong ball on your tongue and it's getting bigger. So as you go down the saxophone, I'm going from E, ah, as I get lower. So. If you don't do that, you get this sound. Right? And I think that's the octave problem that our friend was asking about there on that question. So embouchure. Okay. Oh, Dennis, I said I wanted to answer the flute question, right?
Yeah, right.
Yep. How to
Make
make
them last longer.
How to make flute notes last longer. Easy answer. Make your air hole smaller so not as much air is coming out when you play. So if too much air is leaking out, you get that really sort of airy sound and it doesn't last as long because you're wasting a lot of air going in places that's not making sound. You want to focus your sound like a laser beam, focus your air like a laser beam, and aim it right here at the outer edge of the flute embouchure hole. So instead of, you go, and you can hold it for quite a long time if you focus your air the right way. Now I want to give another shout out to Geometry Dash player who 2638 who has been chiming in with some great answers. Geometry Dash player just answered Apple Studios and said, or Apple Studios, and giving some feedback there on clarinet and saxophone embouchures being very similar, and that's a good answer. They are. One difference between when the clarinet and saxophone embouchure is Ashley Engelbrecht, Harry Potter on the flute. I'll try to get that in today. Saxophone should come more or less straight out of your mouth, a little bit, maybe a little bit angled down. Whereas a clarinet has more of a downward angle. So clarinet is not like this, it's more like this. So that's one of the major differences between the two. Let's see, we had a little request for Harry Potter on the flute, and Dennis, I saw you, did you repost the how to do jazz on the saxophone?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, that goes with another one that says tips for the jazz sound on the saxophone.
Okay. Let's do a little Harry Potter first. I think I did this in another video, but I'll see how much I can remember. I have to practice one. That's actually a pretty tricky melody. It jumps, it has big range, and then it also has some pretty funky chromatic notes in there. So I got it like 90% correct just then. Let me answer this question quickly. We are running out of time. But jazz on saxophone. So jazz sound, someone asked about. That sun is really bright. Jazz sound you develop by listening to jazz players and trying to imitate what they do. And one way you do that is by working on your flexibility. So flexibility, you play like a high note, like a B, and then you work on bending your note by pulling the reed down. And that's how you can get some sounds like some of that saxy, jazzy stuff. Now, the other thing is you have to learn some jazz vocabulary. So working on your blues scale is a good way to do that. Blues scale. That's the minor blues scale. There's another blues scale. So that kind of stuff, working on your blues scale gets you started with learning how to improvise and having things, starting to experiment with making up your own little solos and not being afraid of making mistakes. So there's a little start for jazz for you guys. I saw a couple of comments here that I wanted to respond to. I saw a friend of ours who's watching from Australia. Christine Tudor is watching from Australia and woke up early to watch. So thank you, Christine. How many types of clarinets are there? Okay. Yeah, Dan, maybe I can play Blue Monk. That's a good one. How many different types of clarinets? So the main one is this one. This is what most people just call a clarinet. It's the B-flat soprano clarinet. Dexter, I'm going to answer your flute note to clarinet note question next. B-flat soprano clarinet. The next most common one is the B-flat bass clarinet, which is an octave lower. It's the one that has the curl in it and it sits on the floor. Then there's also E-flat clarinet. It's a little bit less common, but it's kind of a shrunken version of this, and you find it more in older band music. Then there's alto clarinets, which are less commonly used. And let's see, what else are there? Oh, there's contrabass clarinets, which are really big. Sub-contrabass. So there is a... Thank you, Joe. Thank you for helping out. There's a whole range of clarinets that you can check out, but only a few of them are used commonly, okay? Now, it is time to go, guys, but I want to get one more request in. So Dan Castro, who's a friend of ours who watches every week, should I play Blue Monk on, yes, Armin, thank you. Should I play Blue Monk on alto, or what should I play Blue Monk on? You tell me. I'm going to answer the flute clarinet question. I think, I have to go back. How do you transpose flute to clarinet or clarinet to flute? I gotta see. Oh, Dexter. How do you translate or translate the note we would use? Okay, Dan, I'll do alto. The note or the word you would use is transpose. How do you transpose flute notes to clarinet notes? So flute note is concert pitch. You would take every note okay, thank you, Dexter. Every note you see on flute, if you want to play it on clarinet, you would think one note higher. So if you're playing your clarinet, you're looking at flute music, and the flute has a C, you play D. It's one whole step. Or if it says E, you would actually play an F sharp. So it gets a little bit tricky with the flats and the sharps. You have to know your half steps. But basically, it's one letter note higher. Okay, so here is a song called Blue Monk. Wait, how's this one go? Is this da 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 da? That's it. I have to remember how this one goes. And I think it's in F. I think it's in F blues. Dude. Oh geez, Dan, I'm embarrassed now. I can't remember how it goes. I think it starts on the third, right? I'm going to look this one up and listen to it. But then we're going to go, guys. We're going to go pretty soon. But this is a song called Blue Monk. Blue Monk. And let's check it out. That's it. That's it. Okay. I remember it now. And that's the melody. Then you could do some jazz improv after that. That's a song called Blue Monk by Thelonious Monk. All right, so we're going to wrap up. We're over time of our usual 30 minutes. Let's do a few shout-outs before we go. I'll give you some shout-outs if you let me know where you're watching from. And if you follow me on Instagram at Dr. Selfridge, I'll give you a shout-out as well. See you, Christine, 7:40 a.m. in Melbourne, Australia. Thank you for watching. Any shout-outs, or if you follow me on Instagram, I'll give you a shout-out for sure. Tell me where you're watching from. Tornado Cays in West Virginia. Thanks, Dan. I'll do some improv next time, okay? JM is in Canada. Thank you, JM. Eugene is in Atlantic City. Texas, Geometry Dash. Thank you. Eugene is in New Jersey. Peaceful Playlist, Monin. That's a good one. Maybe I'll play that next time. Terry is in Michigan. Let's see. Any other shout-outs before we go? Let me know where you're watching from. Thanks, awesome guy. Rukin is in, I missed your name. You're in Dallas. Domo is watching from England. Awesome. Johnny is in California. Thank you, Yoshi, for following me on Instagram. And Peaceful is in Lacey, Washington. Okay, let's give a thank you to Dennis. Dennis, thank you for being here. Appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you all for following me. More shout-outs next time. I'll be back next week. Thanks for watching, as always. And guys, make sure you practice this week. Keep those skills going over the summer. Okay, so we'll see you same time next week.